You're live. Live.
Okay, good afternoon or good evening. Welcome to the Sutton Vesey Ward Forum public meeting, Wednesday the 22nd of July, via Teams. Today on the agenda we have a coronavirus public update from Dr. Justin Varney, housing and homelessness and neighbourhood services with Councillor Sharon Thompson, who is the Cabinet Member for Housing and Neighbourhoods. We have a highways update from Lucy O'Grady, customer services, Kia Highways, a policing update which will be delivered by me, and community updates as well, also delivered by me today. So first of all, I'm going to hand over to Rob Pocock to say hello, and before I do that, I'm just going to say that we need to advise that this is a virtual meeting, it's online and it will be held in public, and a recording will be made available for public and future record. So over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Kath. So it's just another welcome from me. This is our second innovation in having a virtual ward forum, so I'm delighted to welcome both the presenters and a large audience of residents, I'm sure, are watching us online. Kathy's going to tell you in a minute about how to pose questions in the question and answer box on the screen. That's technologically advanced knowledge, so way above my grades. Kath knows how this works, but really just in terms of how this meeting is going to go, I'm going to hand back to Kath now, and Kath's going to talk about how you actually interact with us in this meeting. She's then going to introduce Councillor Sharon Thompson. We're delighted to have, I think, the first Cabinet Member of the City Council ever to attend a Vesey Ward meeting. So Sharon is breaking new ground for a council here. Then we'll come back to me and I will deal with the public health issues and the Kia Highways issues. We then go back to Kath, who'll round things off with the presentation that she has, a secret presentation which will appear live on your screen very shortly. So I'm going back now, if we can put the live camera back to Kath to talk through how the technology works and introduce Councillor Thompson.
Okay, so for those of you that are listening in, if you wave your mouse over the middle of the screen, your little bar will pop up, and on there you will see a Q&A icon. Click on that and it will bring up the live event Q&A, and you can make put your questions in that area of the chat. And while Councillor Thompson is delivering her update on homelessness and neighbourhoods, if you want to put your questions there, I will then at the end of Councillor Thompson's slot ask those questions on your behalf, and then she will answer them for you. So I hope that makes sense, and I will hand over now to Councillor Thompson, Cabinet Member for Housing and Neighbourhoods. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invite. I'm delighted to be the first Cabinet Member to come and speak to you, which is fantastic. Thank you for the invite. So I have quite a varied portfolio for those that don't know. I have housing, homelessness, bereavement services, registrations, and also localism. So that has kept me particularly busy over the last 2 years, but also since COVID-19 hit the UK. I want to give you a bit of an update. So I will start off in bereavement. We still have restrictions on visiting hours for cemeteries. The reason why we did that is because we have restricted hours when it comes to the numbers of people, or the restrictions around the numbers of people that can attend a funeral. So this helps to manage that situation. The information of opening times for cemeteries can be found on the City Council website. We are constantly monitoring the number of people that can mourn at funerals and also the opening times. The reason why the restrictions were put on is because we wanted to contribute towards not having a high amount of people that were affected by the infection across the city. So we felt that actually if restricting the numbers helped us to keep the numbers down and keep people well and safe and alive, then that was what the direction we went in. Some positive news, or some happy news I should say, that since COVID-19 we have had 6,000 babies being born in Birmingham, which is a huge amount. And across the period of COVID-19 and lockdown, the government asked us not to register babies that were born. So we now have a backlog now that that has been lifted. So the team in the registrations are absolutely working through registering those babies. Anybody that has an urgent request, they will take that into consideration and that will be looked at. So if you know anybody that has an urgent request for registration of a birth, please let your counsellors know. They will let me know and I will make sure that that's looked into. I'll move then now on to housing. And when it comes to housing, Birmingham City Council has 62,000 properties across the city. And when COVID-19 hit the UK, we decided to modify the way we was doing working. So we was only doing priority repairs. We also wanted to make sure that those were vulnerable, that we supported those tenants. So we provided support to over 5,000 tenants who were seen to be vulnerable to make sure that they were okay. We was very much focused on communal areas in blocks and things like that because we needed to make sure they were clean and safe. And also we were very concerned that for those that were struggling financially, before the government decided to put a ban on evictions, Birmingham City Council already took that direction with our own properties. So we've dropped any actions up until now, but we've made sure that we are working with residents who may be finding difficulties and supporting them in putting payment plans into place, signposting them when it comes to looking at their finances and other areas, because we're keen to make sure that we support people as much as possible. We are continuing to speak to the government and lobby because the fear is that once the eviction ban is lifted, you're going to have a number of people who have huge amounts of debt on their rental accounts, whether that's with council or elsewise. So we were constantly in conversation with them on that. We're working with housing associations to make sure that they're in the same space and supporting their tenants. And we are also working with what is called the exempt or supported housing to make sure that they're supporting their tenants also. So that's one thing. Article 4 came into place when it came to HMOs. So now all HMOs in the city have to be registered before it goes to planning. So now they have to go to planning and that has to go through that route, which makes it better, particularly for those with high concentrated areas. And now I shall move on to homelessness. Homelessness, we wanted to protect all the people that were homeless across this city. Over 600 people, single registered with the council, came to us to tell us that they were falling into homelessness over the point of COVID-19. That's a huge amount, 600 people, single adults. We've supported all of those 600 people, and that includes over 70 rough sleepers. At one point, we had rough sleeping down to single figures as the government gave us more resources and told us to get everybody indoors, which we have done. We used a commercial hotel to support that. Commercial hotel, we have given them back their space as of the 15th of June. But I am pleased to say that all of the people that we've worked with that were in the commercial hotel and our commissioned services, all of them have been offered a place and nobody had to return to the street. People were given tenancies, so people now have tenancies in their flats and bungalows, I've heard. That's been from the council and other housing associations. Some people have been reunited with family, which is, you know, really touching, I think. And others have gone into supported accommodation because that's what they need for their level of needs. Not everybody will always take support. And unfortunately, we've had 2 people that have returned back to the streets. And we are really thankful that there wasn't many infections. There was only 2 infections out of the whole homelessness community, which includes families in temporary accommodation. So that was really good. We continue to lobby the government and say, actually, now we have an opportunity to do more work on this and actually get into the prevention space to make sure that in the future we don't get more people facing homelessness. I keep reminding everybody that actually what we've seen in the pandemic is supporting people and stopping them from becoming, saving them from infection and not actually stopping them from becoming homeless. So there's a lot more work to be done in that regard. Other than that, I think the only final thing I think is when it comes to my portfolio is localism. And as you can see, that communities particularly stepped up to the mark when it came to the pandemic, and we're absolutely thankful across the city. So much action's taken place. So we're also looking at how communities can support in very different ways now. We're going to be working more on the localism agenda and revamping the way that we've been doing it, and actually learning the lessons that have come from us. We found that actually communities have led better than us in occasions, we have to be admitting. And, you know, we need to take that into consideration, how we move forward with that. Final thing is, I say, with a number of groups who used to feed homeless people, some of those are redirecting their energies, because what we have found throughout the pandemic was that, as Birmingham is a very giving city, people used to buy someone a Greggs or, you know, give money when they were out and about. That all came to a stop as we all went into lockdown. And those that were more reluctant to take support from services actually were more willing, because there was no one else around. So we're asking some of those groups to redirect some of their energy and help us with other areas when it comes to communities, homelessness and other things across the City Council. And I think I'll stop there. If you've got any questions, I'm more than happy.
So we've had no written questions come up in the live Q&A at the moment, but I have a question for you. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the localism and what we've learned over COVID that's been so spectacular that we're going to revamp the whole system? Is there any indication from you of any exciting new projects that are coming our way? Because, as you know, Vesey Ward is a very community driven place, and we're really proud of our community groups, and they do amazing work, as you've said. Can you give us a little bit more info on that?
Yeah, so I think in terms of localism, I think when it came to the pandemic, communities really showed that they could move really quickly and mobilise. And sometimes, you know, with systems, whether it's the council, NHS or anything else, sometimes we get caught in a lot of bureaucracy that takes a lot of long time to mobilise. We also found that in some areas, and not one size fits all, that actually when the council fitted into the local communities way of organising, it worked better in that area. Okay. And in other areas we needed to take a little bit more of a lead, and we saw that through BVSC. So it's really about having those flexible approaches, I think, Kath, about the way forward. I think one of the key things is for us to capture all the voices and the listening of what people went through and their experiences. I know for me, when it came to housing, there was a number of not incidents, but there was a number of occasions where there were people who were particularly vulnerable but had never actually come to the council and said, I'm going through this. But actually through the food delivery, people saw how they were living and things were going on, and actually coached them into approaching the council and other areas, so we could get them the right levels of support. So I think it's definitely about how listening to the community voices, making sure that the community is at the table when we're having these conversations, because sometimes the council can be a little bit insular. And then also, I think it's the pioneer places have been absolutely invaluable. So I think there's a whole load of things. I don't want to give away too much because I get told off by the team. So I'll just say, watch this space. We should have more things coming out in the following months. The chief executive has actually been really pleased with the way communities and the council have operated, and he will be supporting the agenda a lot more moving forward.
That's amazing stuff. So you had 600 people who were potentially going into homelessness, 70 rough sleepers, and that's down to what, 2? I think that's just astounding, because that was one of the questions one of our people were asking. The numbers are starting to go back up slowly, and that's because it's very transient. So, you know, you'll always get more people coming on at the time. But I think we've been, you know, we're in the better place. But, you know, we have to remember that I actually say the emergency around the pandemic and homelessness will come months down the track once we see other things happen. So we need to get in that prevention space. But a huge amount has been done. So thank you to communities and thank you to all the staff. Brilliant. Rob, do you have any questions?
Thanks, yeah. If you could switch us on to live. Thanks, Leslie. Yes, a couple of points been raised with me, Sharon. I think you can probably help out with this. I know we've been seeing quite a lot of increase in domestic abuse, and obviously the need for safe houses for people to move to. So maybe could you give us an update on what you know about that and what the city is doing? The second, obviously, we've had one or two cases where there's a second question. The issue of street begging and people having been trafficked deliberately, as it were, maybe through modern slavery. Various techniques are used, obviously, to force people out on the street. I know there's a quite strong operation going on to try and get to the bottom of this. So if you could fill us in on what you know about that, that'd be really helpful. Thanks.
Okay, that's great. So when it comes to those at traffic lights, and a lot of people will flag that up, firstly, I always say to the public, please, if you see anyone that you perceive to be rough sleeping or homeless, please report them through street links so we can get the right team to them. We have got to a situation where the outreach team now know the whole city incredibly well and know people by name and faces and are speaking to them. At the moment, we have a homelessness partnership group, and what they are doing now is they're looking at some of the ongoing issues that's been coming on when it comes to people that have been in that situation where there is begging at traffic lights and things like that. Birmingham doesn't want to go down that overly heavy-handed route, and PS, you know, that's not where we want to go into the enforcement space. So we're doing some joint up work in that Councillor John Cotton will be leading around how we can support people at traffic lights and, you know, in other areas. But I do also think we need to do a piece of work, which we are trying to look at how we do that, is actually getting the message out to the motorists, because actually, when you pull up at a traffic light, if nobody gives money or nobody, you know, helps that kind of area, then it will start to slow down and track off. So we'll be looking at that as well. So there's quite a bit coming forward, and as soon as it does, I'll let you know, Rob. Rob, remind me, what was the first question? What was the first question? You're on mute.
You see, the cabinet member is trained in this better than we are. It was about domestic abuse, Sharon, and safe accommodation. Okay,
so when it comes to domestic abuse, we have seen a rise across the country, I think, on that. We've been quite fortunate that Nikki Brenner, who is our cabinet advisor on that, has been quite vocal around this area and has been working with Councillor John Cotton as it falls within his portfolio. There's been meetings with them and housing, and we have been making sure that we can house people as soon as possible. We've maintained the domestic abuse hub throughout the whole of COVID, and we moved that to a telephone service because we knew that people weren't going to be getting out, and we were trying to get the message out of what the telephone number is, particularly around shopping malls and places like that, because actually that was the only place any of us were really going. I think there's going to be a need for more singles when it comes to homelessness, not just because of domestic abuse, but also relationships are just generally breaking down because we're spending far too much time at home together. So, so we anticipate that there might be a rise when it comes to that. So at the moment, we're rethinking about not just we're rethinking around future developments and things like that, and really looking at the needs across the city. But in terms to actual domestic abuse, we've continued with that work, and we are also speaking to the government about maybe possibility of them supporting financially in us having more space when it comes to those, particularly women and children that are fleeing domestic abuse.
Yes, it's a complicated area, isn't it? Rob, did you want to come back on that?
No, not on that, but there's a message in the...
I was just about to do that.
So
we have a resident, Sharon. We have a resident, Sharon, who has said many congratulations for on the work for homeless people. Could you explain a bit more about who the groups were who used to feed people and what kind of things you will be asking them to do?
So I think that across the city, there's a whole range actually, because across the city, you've got some people that will go out and give socks. You've got some people that will go out and do regular feeds. So we're going, previously we held an event which John Cotton spoke at, which was around bringing all those groups, community groups together. So I think one of the key things is just really one, we acknowledge the hard work that they do. That's the first thing. And the second thing is about making sure they're armed with the right information when they do see people out, because sometimes we get an alert to say they've seen someone on the streets, and it comes through hours later. So it's about really arming those people. The other thing is if we've got less people on the streets, actually rough sleepers, then the likelihood is you'll have less of a need for as many groups going out. So we're also looking at how can we send that energy. So for some people, it might be a case of actually the biggest need. I'm not saying it is the biggest, but there might be a need around families, or there might be a need around something else. So it's really assessing what's happened over the course of the pandemic. And a lot of those groups have been supporting tours and other people. So it's about really looking at where the energy is best spent in which particular parts of the city. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Kath. It's been a long day.
Well, it was the question from one of the residents. So, Francis, I hope that did answer the question that you asked. And it's a really fascinating area for me, your portfolio. I think you do fantastic work, and the work that Tours does. And are you collating a lot of information that's going to be useful? Because I know that there's been a lot of data come in through various organisations that's been quite invaluable to the City Council in terms of how we deliver our services out in the future. Has that been helpful for you guys too?
Absolutely, it's been really incredibly helpful. John Cotton has the kind of communities, social cohesion, equality side, and I have the localism. So we've been making a really concerted effort since COVID-19 to try and align some of that together, because they really cross over. Locality have done a piece for me in the localism space, because I'm quite interested in live data. I like to have it when it's coming through. We did this with the homelessness. We have a whole positioning document based on live data. So they spoke to all of the pioneer places and different organisations, and they're getting a lot of their feedback, and they're going to be doing a report for us. I'm also aware BVSC are doing something similar. So there's a lot of data capture, and that is absolutely going to help us to shape moving forward how we're going to look at the localism agenda.
That's brilliant. We've had no more questions coming in for your portfolio, I'm afraid, and we're edging on towards our next item on the agenda. Sorry, I speak forever.
She just told me to.
No, we're just so delighted to have Cabinet Member come live to our meeting, because lots of constituents have been asking about the homelessness situation. So it's great to have the word directly from your mouth about how well it's going, because it's always been such a difficult area to manage, and that it's gone so well over this period. And 2 people being sick, that's outstanding. Absolutely. That just goes to show how well that you've done on all those emergency measures that have been in place. So if there's nothing else that that you would like to say, I'll just check the questions just in case there's anything new come in. No, that's everything, I'm afraid. So
okay then. Well, thank you very much for the invite, and enjoy the rest of your meeting. Okay,
we will. Feel free to stay.
Well, I want to get some tea. Take care. Bye.
Bye, Sharon. Okay, so next on the agenda, and we'll see if he's actually made it yet, because we might be a smidge early for him, is Dr. Justin Varney, but I don't believe he's actually logged on yet. So what I think we'll do is we'll hand over to Kia. So if I can whiz over to Rob to take over the Kia item on the agenda, and then we'll speak to Lucy Dumbleton and have an update on those.
Thanks, Kath. So yeah, the next item, as we're juggling this agenda around, we're moving on to highways. We have with us as a guest, I think one of her debut performances on live meetings, virtual meetings, is Lucy O'Grady, who's the Customer Services Manager for Kia Highways. Members watching will probably recall that the contract for roads, pavements, streetlights and trees moved from the company called Amy to a new company called Kia Highways at the beginning of April. So Lucy is basically representing Kier Highways here today and will introduce you to the way in which the contract is now being managed. Just by way of explanation, those members who are familiar with our awards will know that we have most meetings, we have Carl Randall come to talk to us. Carl Randall is the City Council Highways Engineer for Sutton and Erdington, and he deals with things like yellow lines, works that need to be done to improve road safety, pedestrian crossings, etc. So that's what his job involves. If it comes to repairing potholes or doing longer term maintenance to the roads and pavements, Kier Highways now take that on. So over to Lucy to explain the new role and to enlighten residents as to how Kier are going to be an improvement on the previous arrangements.
Okay,
Lucy.
Lucy, you need to turn your camera and your microphone on. We can't see you at the moment.
There's Lucy.
Thank you for that introduction, Councillor Pocock. Yeah, my name's Lucy O'Grady. I'm the Customer Service Manager for Kier Highways now. And as Councillor Pocock points out, this is my debut ward committee meeting. So, and I'm very pleased to be able to say, I'm not sure whether I should say this or not, but I am a resident of the Vesey ward as well. So it's quite fitting that my first ward committee meeting is in my home ward. I do cover all 69 wards across the city. So when you hear me speak, I won't be referencing Vesey ward or Sutton Coldfield in particular. I'll be talking as the city as a whole, because as I say, I cover the whole area. But if you do have any questions at any point, please put them in the chat. If they are specific to you or private, please contact Councillor Pocock or Councillor Hartley, and they will get your message to me privately. Yeah, so Kier Highways took over the highways maintenance contract from Amy on the 1st of April. So we have transitioned across 378 members of staff that formerly worked for Amy. We now work for Kier. There was a very long, very well documented disagreement between the City Council and Amy, and they agreed to part ways. And Kier have stepped in on an interim contract basis until the City Council can retender the process for the remaining 14 years of the maintenance contract that Amy left behind. So we are on an interim service basis, which means we don't cover everything that the former PFI used to cover, but it does mean that the City Council have far more direct influence over how we work, how the programmes are collated, and it's very much a two-sided partnership now, as opposed to the former PFI, which wasn't fit for purpose. So the things that we cover are well, pretty much everything that you see out on when you step outside of your house. So we look after things like the trees, the street lights, the roads, the pavements, the gully system, the traffic signals, the lining on the streets, the street furniture, anything you can think of really out on the highway. We will maintain until July 2021, when the contract goes out for retender. The way we work, we have a team of 20 highway safety inspectors, and those safety inspectors inspect every road on the Birmingham network once every 6 months. So your road that you live on will have a highway inspector walk it at least once every 6 months. Depending on the priority of the road, it may also receive a driven inspection once a month, or once every 3 months, or once every 6 months as well. And during those safety inspections, the highway inspectors will look to identify any road defects or any of the defects for any of the services that I've just mentioned, and mark them up and schedule them for repair. We do have, as I say, it's a large network. So when those repairs come into us for programming, they will receive a priority categorisation, and the maintenance programme is then built around the categorisation of those of the defects that the inspector has marked. So we're doing that across the whole of the Birmingham network. So it's possible that we do often hear, you know, some people will say, well, it's been marked up for a while. It depends. We haven't forgotten about it, and we won't have forgotten about it. It's just depending on its priority in the network, in the routine maintenance programme, as to when we do it and when we schedule that repair. That's pretty much the routine maintenance side of things. In terms of resurfacing, that's probably the biggest change that elected members and residents alike will notice. Kia don't have control or full control of the resurfacing programme anymore. It's very much done as an alliance with the City Council. We've bought a company, I'm sure many of you will know them, Tarmac are on board. Kia remain the principal contractor, but Tarmac will deliver the schemes. So Kia won't deliver those personally. And the formation of the programmes and how they are collated it sits with the City Council now, whereas previously it would have sat with Amy. So there's a lot more direct control from the City Council over that programme and what goes into it. And I think that's pretty much all I had to say in terms of who we are, how we're working. It's all still very new for us as well, so please bear with us. We've transitioned to a new senior management team via Teams and these virtual meetings. Our operational depot remains operational. We are key workers and we are keeping the city moving during COVID, but obviously only our operational teams and supervisors are entering the depot. Everyone else is working from home, and that includes planners, schedulers, customer service teams, all of the direct work streams. Everyone is working from home until it's safe for us to return to the depot.
Great, thanks, Lucy, for that. It's lovely to see you live on the screen, but it's great to think also that we have the head of the entire customer operation for the Kia Highways in Birmingham living in the Vesey ward. I know where she lives.
Could do with you not telling the rest of the city that, if I'm honest.
Right, okay, we're not going to say anything. The service is impartial, but it's always useful to, as you watch the roads in your neighbourhood, you see how things are going. Two questions for me. In the era of Amy, there was an obscure arrangement at the assessment of whether pavements needed to be repaired. If a road was in a dodgy state, pavements were in a poor state, somehow it was possible for Amy to improve one side of the road and then deem the whole of that road not to need the other side to be improved. There was a sort of weighting system. As I understand it, the new arrangement isn't as complicated as that, and it's more likely that a road with dodgy pavements will be dealt with as a block rather than some bits of it done and not others. Hopefully you can clarify that one. Second question was, trees overhang the pavement or obscure traffic signs. Is this now Kia who can actually cut those back or charge the household or take steps or serve a notice on a householder if the bushes and trees are actually in the way? Is that a role for you, or is that a role for the city?
In terms of the programming, yes is the short answer. We are able to take a much more pragmatic approach. The PFI was bound with huge amounts of constraints. The interim contract and Kia in particular are very keen to address some of the known issues that frustrated the public previously and not make the same mistakes, I suppose, for want of a better word. We are able to influence some of what the engineering decisions that are made based on common sense approach, which previously it was very difficult to. So yes, we don't expect to see some of the glaring irritations, I think, that were born out of the contractual PFI. I mean, anyone the frustrations were felt by everyone, I think, across the board. We hope to be released from those frustrations now. And from what we've seen, we have started the resurfacing programme. We've started in earnest. We're all over the city at the moment, particularly whilst the roads were quieter during COVID. We are seeing a massive reduction in complaints and increase in compliments, which is fantastic for Kia. As I say, we are keen to shake off the bad memories of the past and move forward with a new slate. In terms of overhanging trees and vegetation, slightly tricky. Traffic signals, yes, we will come out and trim them immediately if they're a safety hazard. If they're not a safety hazard, so if there's a tree or vegetation overhanging the footway that looks like it could become a problem in the future, we will issue an advisory notice to the homeowner or the occupier, politely requesting that they trim it back. If they don't trim that back within 28 days, we will issue a more stern notice that will advise that they could be putting the safety of the public at risk. If people have been forced into the carriageway to get around some vegetation, then we can't have that. If that fails to take effect, the case will either be referred back to the City Council for enforcement action, or we will take action and we may choose to recharge the homeowner, depending on the circumstances. With the advisory notices, it's important to, if people are unable to trim, we will give them a referral to Age UK. So if it's a mobility issue or an age issue, and people, are genuinely unable to look after the vegetation, then we will give them, we will signpost them to people that can assist.
Okay, thanks very much. A couple more from me, if you can switch me back on. Yeah, thanks very much. The last technical question, you may not know the answer to this. I have been advised that there is a scheme in mind, and it probably is still in its infancy, to improve the number of the junctions and the traffic flows along the Chester Road, running all the way up from basically the Jaguar and the Land Rover site near to Castle Vale, all the way up to Strictly, along that very long road which cuts right through the Vesey ward. My question is, do you know anything about this? I'm trying to find out a bit more about it. Just while I'm on, I will make a note here that in the chat there is a congratulations and thanks from the Neighbourhood Forum in Boldmere for the volunteering work that your team carried out in installing a bench in the shopping centre, which I haven't had the chance to use yet, but I will look forward to using very soon. The chair of the Neighbourhood Forum is grateful for your volunteering work there. If you can deal with the Chester Road question, then Kath also has a question.
Yes, there is a programme to upgrade to upgrade a number of the traffic, we call them traffic loops, that are counting the traffic and that are telling the traffic signals how many cars are approaching. There's a traffic loop upgrade programme citywide. I don't know the specifics about the Chester Road, but I can very much imagine that it's included in that. So I'll check the specifics and let you know. But yeah, that's underway across the city.
Brilliant. Kath, did you want the question? She's muted.
You're muted.
You need to turn your microphone on, Councillor.
I apologise. Thank you for stealing my thunder on the community update. But yeah, the Boldmere Neighbourhood community really wanted to thank you for all the support with putting the bench in. And for those who were watching live, there will be a lovely picture of it later under the community update. So you'll get to see where it is and what it looks like. But my question to you, Lucy, is Rob and I recently did a community survey that went out, and one of the questions was accessibility for people with physical disabilities and maybe motorised vehicles that they need to use on the pavements. And we had quite a number of people come back mentioning certain pavements that were, let's say, wobbly and hard to navigate with their disabilities. First of all, do you have a remit along that on that under the disabilities remit? And secondly, would you like to join me on a small inspection of some of the roads that people have highlighted to me?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm always ready to come out and take a look myself. I prefer that, to be honest, rather than seeing a list of road names that I'm either unfamiliar with or need to check out myself anyway. So yeah, if you're with me, that's great. Yes, mobility and disability issues are very much a factor of our assessment. So when our highway inspectors are checking for defects, if it is likely to cause mobility issues, it raises the priority of the repair. I mean, and when I say this, it's really important. Every single defect that our inspectors look at receives its own assessment. So I know sometimes that can cause frustrations when we go into a road and we may repair one pothole quicker than another, or we'll do one footway quicker than another. The good news is, with Kia, the planning and the scheduling allows us now to, if we are coming into a road, we can do all defects within the road rather than just stick to the priority scoring matrix, which is what we were previously bound by. So you will see less return visits from us now. We will come in hopefully once only.
Do a big sweep and then it's all done and dusted.
Yeah.
Marvellous. Okay, I'll hand back over to you, Rob.
Great, thanks, Kath. Yes, and I'd just like to close this item by thanking Lucy for her presence here today. I hope you've enjoyed your debut performance in a virtual
Lucy.
Ward Forum.
Thank you all.
We will look forward to seeing you again. We'll probably have you on an annual basis. I know we do also actually have an specifically appointed Kia Highways inspector, Chris, I think.
Highway steward, yeah, Chris Richards.
Chris Richards, that's it. We'll probably invite him to a further meeting, but thank you for your time. I'm keen to ensure that the improved standards of service and response that you've highlighted will be carried out. We shall make sure that's the case.
We're confident.
There we go, that's what I like to hear.
Thank you.
Right, thanks Lucy. See you soon.
Bye.
Next item, really honoured to welcome Dr. Justin Varney to our live ward forum. Justin and I have conversations through the Health and Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee, including a long session yesterday, so we've got to know each other very well. And we're honoured to have one of the busiest men in Britain, I think, live with us tonight. I know he has a small window, I think, of half an hour at the very most with us. So, Justin, I think really what we need to ask you to do, if you will, is to update us all on where we stand with the pandemic in Birmingham. I know there's a lot of concern about what happens if we have a lockdown. You've highlighted the risks of us having a second wave, so maybe you could guide us through prospects of that happening and then what we do if it does. Over to you.
Great, thank you, councillors, and thank you for having me at your ward forum. So I'll try and cover all of those, and please prompt me if I forget any of those points. So just to give us a quick recap on where we've been in the journey. So COVID-19 appeared around December in China. We then saw quite rapid spread across the world. It first came to the UK in February, and we had our first case in Birmingham about the second week of March. Looking back through the data, I can see that the case numbers rose to about the middle of April, when at our peak we had about 134 cases in a single day. Then they came down a little bit, then they went back up again before they started the descent. So we've had a bit of a camel hump of the first wave. And at the moment, we've started to see a slight increase in numbers across Birmingham. And we've gone up from having about 10 cases a day to now having nearer 20 a day. So I am keeping a close eye on what's happening. What we're seeing is across the city, it's a pretty general increase. So in most parts of the city, we've gone from having 2 cases to having 4 cases. In some areas of the city, we've got 2 or 3 houses in which people are all from the same family. And they've obviously got together at some point, forgotten to keep that 2 meters of distance from each other, got carried away and tried to give a bit of love with a handshake or a hug. And they've given a bit of COVID at the same time, unfortunately. And that's mean we've seen in some areas suddenly go up to kind of 14 cases in a week. And that's not what we'd expect to see, but we can explain what's happened there. So we're not seeing some of the challenges that areas like Sandwell are seeing at the moment, where Sandwell's running about twice the rate of cases that we are. So in Birmingham, we have about 12 cases per 100,000 population. Sandwell's running about 25 at the moment. And for them, that's very much linked to some workplaces that weren't doing perhaps what they should have been doing in terms of risk assessments and keeping their staff safe. Some of that has obviously impacted on us because there are some people who work in those workplaces who are live in Birmingham. So we're keeping a really close eye on what's happening in Sandwell, particularly in the Smethwick area, which I know is not immediately on your doorstep in Sutton Vesey, but it's not that far away. So we are keeping an eye on that. We know from the national research that about 20% of the population have caught COVID so far. So that's 80% of us have still got to catch it. So it's really the case we will have a second wave when rather than if. And what we think at the moment is the second wave is most likely to come in the autumn when the weather gets worse. And that's because we close all our windows. We don't go outside to socialise, where the risk is less of spreading the virus. And we're inside, it's cold, it's damp, which the virus likes. We're inside with the windows closed, which the virus likes. And of course, we also have all those celebrations like Christmas that come up that mean we forget and we give a little bit extra with the love and give the COVID at the same time. So that's where we're thinking at the moment. And what we're trying to do at the moment as part of that thinking is prepare people and say, what can you do before the second wave comes that reduces your chance of dying or becoming seriously unwell from COVID? And there are 3 things that increase your risk of dying that you can't do anything about, and 3 that you can. So the 3 that you can't really change are your age, much as there are beauty products that would like to believe that you can. If you're over 80, you're at much higher risk than younger people, and so you know, that's one factor. If you're a man, you're at a higher risk than if you're a woman, and if you're from a non-white British ethnic group, you're at a higher risk as well. So those 3 things you can't do anything about, and they're not about genetics, they're about the other 3 things that are increasing people's risks of dying. So first, that's being overweight or obese. So most of us have put on a little bit of extra weight during lockdown. So it's really important to try and let that go over the next 2 to 3 months. And we'll be launching some campaigns next week to help people with that. The second is smoking. Smoking definitely increases your risk of being very unwell with COVID. So giving up smoking, moving to e-cigarettes, really important step that you can do that makes a difference. And then the third is if you have a long-term condition like diabetes, high blood pressure, chronic lung disease or kidney disease, get on top of it. Get control of it and get, particularly diabetics, get your blood sugars under control. We're working with the NHS at the moment so that all the GP practices are looking at the patients who should have been in for an annual check and haven't in the last couple of years, and reaching out and going, you know, can we have a chat about your diabetes? How can we help you make sure that it's being well managed? Because that's what makes you particularly vulnerable. Now, the reason those 3 play out in terms of gender and ethnicity is before we came into lockdown, we knew that 1, men were carried more excess weight than women. So in general, men are more obese. They're not as good at going to the doctors when they're sick. And if they've got a chronic condition like diabetes, they don't tend to look after themselves as well as women. Now, the same is true to some extent for ethnic communities, but there's an added element to that some of the conditions like diabetes are more common because of genetics in those ethnic communities. And sadly, we know that also from the research that the NHS has not always been as good as looking after them as it has white British people. So there's a checklist of things as a doctor you're supposed to have done to look after a diabetic patient. And in the national audit, it showed that people who weren't white British were less likely to have all those boxes ticked. So we knew that was an inequality before we came into this. That's undoubtedly played out in terms of the deaths that we've seen and the disproportionate deaths. So now the focus is trying to fix that before the next wave comes. Finally, I'll just talk about testing and vaccination, because they're both questions people ask me about. So it's free to get an NHS test for COVID if you have symptoms, or if you have been in contact with someone who has had symptoms. And in the second one, if you have a contact, you'll be told specifically you need to get a test by the NHS Test and Trace service. But for anyone who's got symptoms, high temperature, new cough, change in your sense of smell or taste, ring 119 or go on the NHS website. That's how you get a test. There are 3 different ways that you can get that test. You'll either get an appointment at a drive-through site. So if you have a car, the closest one to us is in Edgbaston Cricket Ground, but there are also some that move around the city. So I think for Sutton Vesey, it's probably the Brewery Street Coach Park is probably your nearest mobile site, because the other 2 are the City Football Ground and the Moseley Rugby Club. And I know at least the geography, Moseley's a long way from you. So I think Brewery Street's probably your closest one. And that site's on a rotation, so it's only there like every other week. So you book an appointment for the drive-through, or you can get a postal kit where it's sent to your house. It will tell you which post box you need to post it in and what time slot you have to post it in. But that's one you do for yourself. The third option, which I don't think is much use to you currently in Sutton Vesey, is the walk-through site in Villa Street in Newtown, because it's probably a little bit too far to walk, particularly if you've got symptoms. But we are starting to look at more testing sites across the city, and we'll be working over the next month or so to identify different sites in each ward, so that we can tell the ward councillors and work with you to let residents know that if numbers start to rise in a particular area, this is where we're going to put the tent. And also, if we're going to increase testing in general in the city, because at the moment we're running about 560 tests per 100,000 citizens, I'd like to see that more like 650. The highest rate in the region is in Solihull. They're at 760. No one knows why, because they haven't got more positive cases. So they think that might just be worried people kind of blagging a test, if you like. And we don't want to see that. We want to see people who've got symptoms getting a test. But part of that is increasing access for people who haven't got a car as well, with more walk-through sites. So that's where we're heading. The final point I touch on is about vaccine. And that's because I often get asked, when's the vaccine coming? That's the thing that will change all of this. So vaccines take about 18 months to develop normally. And that's because you've got to find the right combination that makes your body create a response. And that response has got to be strong enough to protect you. The vaccine's also got to be safe. And we've got to know that it works in different types of people. So there's quite a lot of stages that have to go through to get to a vaccine that works. And then when you find one that works, we've got to make enough of it to give to everyone. And we've also got to set up all the clinics and all the call and recall systems to get everyone. And if you think, we start seasonal flu jabs in September, and we usually give the last one around the end of February. And in seasonal flu jabs, we're only giving that to people who are over 65 and people who've got long-term conditions and children under 5, not the whole population. So even if we get a vaccine that works, I think it's unlikely we'll see that rolling out to everyone until the beginning or middle of next year. And it will be something that you choose to do. We can't force you to have a vaccine. But I think it's, most of us would say, well, you know, if this is going to stop me catching a disease that could potentially kill me, why wouldn't I take it? You know, I think that's really important. But you know, that's why we need to adjust to this environment in which we wear face coverings, going into shops, on buses and in taxis, where we keep the social distance, where we keep washing our hands and keep not touching our face. All of those things keep us safe. And defer that second wave for as long as possible to keep ourselves safe, our families safe, our communities and our city safe. So I'll finish there, and I'm happy to take any questions from either the councillors or also from your ward members.
Thanks very much, Justin. And I really want to say thanks to you for the time you put into this. You've got this great ability to talk in simple and plain language. That is a compliment, believe me. It's an unusual quality amongst all of us, actually. So I'm really pleased that you've given such a clear summary of the situation. I know you've got to leave in 4 minutes, I think, to your next video conference. So I'm just looking in the chat to see what questions have been asked. There's one I'll pinch from the CAF, actually. We did have early data that showed, I think, in what was an area 42, which covers a significant proportion of our ward, that was the highest locality for deaths, I think it was, and that I think at the time was put down to care homes. Am I right in thinking that this area no longer spikes in quite the same way, because the most recent cases seem to be younger people out and about in the community, and therefore maybe our ward isn't quite so exposed? Is that the case for us?
Yes, so I think you're talking about the area around Chester Road, isn't it? That's kind of in part of your patch and part of the other. Yeah, so very much what that was looking at the overall total number of deaths that have happened through the whole outbreak, and Chester Road's quite unusual, and it does have a very high number of care homes, particularly of care homes looking after incredibly vulnerable older adults. So particularly people with dementia who are.
Can I butt in? Sorry, Leslie, you need to switch the camera on to Justin rather than me. I'm live.
No problem. There we go. So yeah, so Chester Road did have a high number of deaths compared to other areas. When we looked into that, it is people who died in care homes, and Chester Road has a lot of care homes, but it also has care homes working with some of the most vulnerable older people, so particularly care homes looking after people with dementia. And sadly, your risk of dying if you're over 80 and you have dementia is even higher. So it's about 1 in 5 people over 80 who go into hospital who die from COVID. And if you have dementia as well, that increases again your risk to be much higher. So we think that's what happened in terms of through the outbreak in the Chester Road area. We're not seeing it in terms of new cases. Sutton Vesey doesn't stand out particularly on the map for me at the moment. But what we are seeing is across the city, that general shift to people of working age. And as I said before, it's those clusters. It's where we're going and being social. That's where we're spreading not just the love, but the COVID with it. And that's the bit we need to be a little bit more conscious of at the moment.
Thanks, Justin. That's a lovely message to get across. I shall try and remember that one. The final point, and you've got a minute or two left with us. I think you've indicated if the worst comes to the worst and we go back down into a second wave, time-wise, you were saying this is likely to be when the winter comes, people are huddling indoors. Is this October, November, December? I think it is. And do you know, or can you advise us any more about what might happen if there is a local lockdown? It's maybe not all of Birmingham, but it'd be parts of Birmingham or a community or a school, for example. Maybe you can make that the final comment.
Sure. So I think it's unlikely we're going to see a local lockdown at a level below the city. And the reason I say that is that when I look at what happens and the way that we live our lives in Birmingham, we're always nipping all over the place. And whether it's up to Sutton Coldfield or down to Acox, you know, there's a lot of movement across the city. And where we're seeing rise, we're seeing the whole city rising. There are obviously some bits that aren't rising quite as fast, but that's generally the Edgbaston Reservoir and Sutton Park, not the bits that people live in. So I don't think at the moment we really are conceptualising an environment in which we would lock down a particular part of the city. Instead, what we're thinking through is if we do start to see increases, we can target some of our social media, like our Facebook adverts, based on postcode. We've also been working with the neighbourhood network schemes, obviously with members like yourselves, to do really much stronger push on targeting of information. The other thing to say is we don't really need to close schools or workplaces unless an outbreak gets out of control. And that's why it's so important that businesses reach out to us when they have their first case, not when they've got 3 cases. Because by the time you've got 3 cases, you've almost certainly got 10. And unfortunately, that's what we saw happen in Sandwell, was the businesses didn't come forward with the first case. They came forward with their 3rd or 4th case. In Birmingham, what I'm seeing at the moment is businesses are coming forward with their first case. So are schools. We are seeing people come forward really quickly and go, I've got someone who's got COVID, help me, give me the right advice. And that's really important to controlling the outbreak. Because in general, that advice is about people that we identify who's been exposed, who needs to isolate for 14 days, who might need a test, what needs to be cleaned, and then business can go on like usual. Where we're seeing places closed, particularly schools, for example, is because a large number of staff have to isolate for 14 days and they can't keep a safe ratio of pupil to staff. So it's not about the spread of the virus, it's about the impact of the virus on who needs to isolate.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Justin. You've done your quota at times, so we're really grateful again for your putting us into your priority list for the day. We will no doubt see you again sometime in the autumn when we next meet. Thanks again for your time. For those watching, incidentally, Justin's advice, how to stay healthy, eat healthy, there's a lovely set of videos, YouTubes, which have been circulated. And I will, to everybody who's picked up this agenda by email, I will make sure that's circulated to all of you listening. It's definitely worth a watch. And thanks, Justin and his team, Public Health, for putting them together. Right, so that's it for me tonight. The high spot of the evening, with respect, thanks, if we can move over to Kath, is the presentation, which we're now going to see. Kath's got a handle on the technology, so she knows how to do this. Over to Kath.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is actually policing, and then following that will be community updates. So I've got a small presentation on some of the policing things, because I had an update from Sergeant Heather Jones. So I thought, I'll make a nice snazzy presentation. So I'm just about to share it with you. Just bear with me. Share.
This is where we know whether she's got the skill or not. Yes.
Can you see that? Okay, so this is the policing update that came from Heather Jones. So first of all, we discussed what was going on in the park at the moment, and she did confirm that there has been a dispersal order put in place, but the effectiveness of these orders are only as good as the amount of police officers that are available, and unfortunately we never have enough police officers, but whenever there's a spike in good weather, I say spike because that's what we've just been hearing Dr. Barney talk about. Whenever there's good weather, there is an upping in the presence of youngsters in the park acting silly and whatnot, wherefore, and at those points in time the police are sending more resources into the park, so they're keeping on top of it as best they can, and if there are any issues, obviously call 999 if you're in danger or anything like that. Next item is bike marking. Since we last spoke about the bike marking, and we advertised it for the police, they've had 40 plus bikes marked in our ward, so thank you very much for getting in touch with the officers to do that, because there was a spate of crime around bikes being stolen from sheds and homes as well. And if you wish to get your bike marked again, you just need to email the Vesey police team. The team have given me a couple of crime stats. Vehicle crime is at 14 for the last month and burglary at 11. So the spikes in burglaries in Sutton Coalfield have been around mainly Sutton Park and the roads periphery to that, so like Monmouth Drive, etc., and all around that part of the park. So the police had targeted certain prolific offenders whose modus operandi matched what were going on in the burglaries that the police were attending. So they targeted these 3 particular individuals, and so far, as of last week, 2 arrests would be made and another one was imminent, and one of those people arrested had been sentenced to 28 months rather. So they know what they're doing and they're going and they're getting for it, so we should see those figures come down again. Now, one of the other issues that's really pertinent to a lot of people in the ward, and in particular there's certain roads where there has been visible activity where drugs have been exchanging hands, etc. And just to reassure you all, I've spoken to the Sergeant Heather Jones, and she's reassured me that there are regular patrols down that particular area every single day, and there's been an uplift in drug warrants in our ward to combat this type of crime. And in addition, there have also been covert operations and at one point even a foot chase, which unfortunately did not end in an arrest for anybody. So that's that. The final thing from Sergeant Jones is that Business Watch is upping its game, in particular in the New Oscott area. So they'd spent a lot of time working on getting sharing agreements in place between Tesco, Aldi, Lidl, Homebase to really hone in on that area to make sure it's working as efficiently as possible. And this should all be up and running this week, which means that they can now launch information out to all premises on local and prolific offenders to nip that in the bud as well. So that's the community policing update. Next, we have Street Watch, which I know because I live near Beacon Strollers, that there's been way more people offering their services to join Street Watch, which has been great. One of the issues a few months back was that there were not enough vests for people to wear to join the Street Watch teams, which, as daft as it sounds, it's one of the rules that when you're trained you need to wear this fluorescent item of clothing. But we've had 45 new vests delivered, which means that we can recruit more people onto Street Watch. In addition to that, because of COVID-19, they've also got a training video coming soon, so there'll be an even easier way to get your training done and to then start on a particular Street Watch. So what I suggest you do if you're interested in this is email Satpal, who is the local one of the local PCSOs, and he will either, if you're near one that's already set up, you can join that one, or he'll set up a new one for you in your area. So keep an eye on that and go for it, because it's a really great scheme to join. Next on the agenda is Speed Watch. Now, I did mention our community survey earlier in the meeting, and there are a lot of places where speeding is a real issue in the ward. And when I spoke to Sergeant Heather Jones last week, she committed to me that for every shift pattern that her PCSOs are on, that we should have a speed watch on one of those shift patterns. So that means we should get a speed watch once every 10 to 14 days at least. So in my we could do how many, 25 or so roads a year. And in addition to which, Vesey ward, I don't know whether you can see this, nod to me Rob if you can see this.
I can see it, but I don't think the viewers can see it.
Oh, you don't think the viewers can see it?
When you drop your presentation, why not you wave it then?
Oh, when I drop the presentation.
Yeah, at the end.
So what's happened is we have now got a dedicated speed gun for Vesey ward. It was donated generously by an anonymous individual, so I can't name who that was, but this is the means by which we can produce way more speed watches, so that's fantastic. I'll stop there to see if there are any questions from residents, so bear with me, I'll stop sharing that and come back and live.
Just looking
This is the speed watch camera, by the way, the little trigger. That belongs to Vesey Ward now. So, you know, if you are on a road where you are concerned about the speed of traffic and at particular times of day, get in touch with the Vesey Neighbourhood Police and we'll start scheduling those speed watch groups. So any questions from anybody?
I'm just butting in here, Kath, because I haven't seen any questions arrive for about half an hour. So I just hope, if you're listening to this and have been trying to send a question, I just hope the technology hasn't fallen over, because the last question that came in from anybody outside was at 7:45. So it's been very quiet.
That's very unusual for our group of residents.
Yeah, so if it's you out there wondering why your questions haven't been asked, it's because we haven't seen them for the last half an hour.
So if somebody out there could do a test for us, that would be great.
Any way that Jen Leslie could make sure that we've got the connection right. In the meantime, Kath, just a quick one. On the question of people taking part in speed watch and street watch, are there any rules here in the coronavirus social distancing? Can anybody get involved? Are there people advised not to be involved? How does that, what's the guidance on this? Do you know?
So the guidance is the same as it would be for any group meeting, that you will have to be socially distanced in the item that you're doing, unless you're working within a bubble. So it won't prevent these watches going ahead, but we do have to work within the guidelines. But all that training will be given when you decide to join up, and you'll be trained on how to do it safely, and there will always be a police officer present anyway, so that shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, that's good. I suggest, Kath, we move on to the rest of your presentation. If there are any residents out there still watching, please just put something in the chat, a hello, yes, hi, whatever. If we don't get it, we'll know the line is down. So please, any of you out there, just send us something and we'll know whether the line's working or not. Kath's got some other community updates in the meantime.
So we'll go back to that. So the next is community update. So as usual, we like in our ward meetings to give everyone in the community an opportunity to speak about the work that they're doing. First and foremost, we have Age Concern, Sutton Coldfield Neighbourhood Network Scheme. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Kate Gomez, who has been the manager of the Age Concern Neighbourhood Network Scheme for the last couple of years, I believe, who has now moved on to start another career elsewhere. And her replacement is a lady by the name of Miriam Aslam, and she will be starting at the end of August. So when she starts, I'm sure we'll have a nice welcome from her, and we'll introduce her at the next ward meeting. They would like to state that they are still accepting funding for any COVID-19 related issues that community groups are still dealing with. So if you haven't already applied for a grant under the COVID-19, please do so. But the only caveat is it can't be for food parcels or delivery. So I think that part of that side of things is trailing off. Also, they've said that they will be sending information packs out soon covering what practical help is available with the NNS, and they will be contacting all NNS assets individually just to see what support you guys need out there, and to show that they are also working with community groups to help them adapt to the new restrictions. For example, the senior citizens of Punjab are now being supported to deliver smaller WhatsApp buddy groups to support one another. So that's great work that's going on. And if you have any issues or any concerns or any questions, again, nns@ageconcernbirmingham.org.uk rather. So Eco Sutton, obviously lockdown has curbed but not stopped their campaigning. Eco Sutton are very good at keeping an eye on the pollution in our ward, and there wasn't a significant decrease in the levels of pollution due to people being in lockdown, and that is starting to climb, I believe. They state that with representatives from 3 local eco churches, we took part in a virtual meeting with the Climate Change Coalition with MP Andrew Mitchell as well, who has also joined the Environmental Network. They are still monitoring the air quality, and it's deteriorating, and they'll be taking part in the Town Council consultation on cycle routes. So if you've got any input into that, please contact Eco Sutton. They're also keeping an eye on the Tyseley incinerator, which is a heavy emitter of carbon. So thank you very much for looking after us in that respect, Eco Sutton. We much appreciate everything that you do to keep an eye on the pollution in our ward and in the city, obviously. So next item on the agenda, I'm whizzing through this because I know we're coming short on time. Bannersgate Neighbourhood Forum.
Just butt in before you do, Kath.
Yeah. Just
to butt in, I don't know if you've followed on the private chat, but it appears the line did crash, the Q&A line did crash for a few minutes. So does anybody watch it?
Right.
If you sent us a question in the last half an hour, we haven't seen it. But if you want to send it again, and there's still time for us to answer it, please do. Just send it in again. Sorry, Kath, so over to you again.
Okay, no problem. So Bannersgate Neighbourhood Network Forum, they've recently, because the community hall has been inaccessible due to COVID restrictions and stuff, they are working on a way to reopen the community hall, which will be a really great asset to help the local people there, because I'm sure they've missed all the coffee mornings and the community activities that go on there. So thank you, Tony Willis, for all the hard work you do there, and in addition for all the support you've been giving local people, you and your team, and David, etc. So also Tony is in the latter stages of producing the next edition of Gatepost. So if you have any anything you would like to go in there, if you can email bgatepost@gmail.com, and in the subject line put email Gatepost so that Tony gets that straight away from you. Next community group is the Boldmere Neighbourhood Forum, and as promised, there is a picture of the wonderful bench that was paid for by the Neighbourhood Forum and is now located on Boldmere High Street outside Edge Clothing, and it's for anybody to use. So if you're a weary shopper and your feet are hurting you because we have that much to see in Boldmere High Street, you can take a break now and sit on this lovely bench. And again, Boldmere Neighbourhood Forum would like to thank especially Lucy O'Grady for their public spirited work and the installation of the bench. And the next thing to do with the bench is it needs a plaque and a dedication on there, and that will be coming soon. So help yourself with that. Other things to mention here are there is still a significant amount of money in the bank account for the Boldmere Neighbourhood Forum that was allocated to CCTV coverage of the Park Court estate. So we need to do some more work on what we can do with that money, whether it needs to go back to the proceeds of crime fund or whether we can allocate it to something else in the future. So thank you for that again, Ray. That was lovely to get that update from you and to have a lovely chat with you on the phone yesterday. So for me, this is the final slide, and I'm aware that there's been some questions in the chat around closure, certain issues around Boldmere School, and I'll come to that after I've read this statement out. Now, the government have stated that all children must be back in school in September. Now, this means that all the fines that were basically knocked on the head and nobody was allowed to be fined for not going into school because of COVID, that's all going to restart in September. However, I've spoken to Birmingham City Council because this is one thing that really concerned me, was that if your child cannot get into school, that for the first half term there will be no fines issued, not from Birmingham City Council anyway, but they will be monitoring closely all the children that are out of school. So if you have a child, whether they've got special educational needs or not, and they are struggling to return to school, you can get in touch with me directly or Rob directly. That's absolutely fine. Or you can go onto the local offer website, and that's localoffer.birmingham.gov.uk/coronavirus-help/ and get some support there. But please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any issues around that. Secondly, locally, what's been happening is our local school, Boldmere Junior School, because of the COVID restrictions, I believe, have had to, I'm going to close this presentation down actually before I carry on. Just do that. That's better. That might help the bandwidth. So we've had some issues, some questions rather, in the chat about Boldmere Junior School, Boldmere Junior and Infants rather. They have decided that because of certain issues around COVID-19, that come September for the first term, which is through till the end of December, I believe, will now be closing half day on a Friday. So there was a lot of concern around this from a lot of parents, and what I've done is I've spoken to the relevant director from the service to ask some of the questions on your behalf about the consultation process, which seems to be the key area of concern. Now, consultations do always have to take place for any changes to the school day, because schools are required to have at least 380 sessions during each school year. And the DfE expects schools to consult with parents and others before making changes to the school week. However, Boldmere have indicated that on their website they're closing for reasons linked to COVID-19. And we're looking into at the moment, we'll be able to get back to you on this, about whether the governing body has powers to override the legal requirements described that I've described earlier. And that means it's most likely that they are allowed to do this, but there are some issues for parents around this. One of the reasons I do know why they're closed early is because there are simply not enough staff to then do lesson planning as well. So I'm thinking we need to have some discussions between parents and teachers and the school rather to iron out any of the issues that are coming forward. I hope that covers at least some of the issues that you're experiencing there, or some of the concerns rather than issues, and please don't hesitate to contact me with any concerns, and I'll get back to anybody with further information as I get it from the City Council along that issue. I can't see the chat at the moment, but are there any questions there?
I can't see anything on the chat, Kath, but a question for me, do we know if any of the other schools in our ward, the Oscott, Downsgate, are going to be looking to reduce hours? I haven't heard anything from anybody else, but is this possible?
So it's entirely possible, but I have not heard that any other school is considering the same measures that Boldmere School have taken. Each school is an individual unit to itself, and each school will have different resources available to them. And I'm sure that the school have done this with a heavy heart, actually, because they really care about the kids in our community. We can see that from the investment they've made in the resource-based unit, etc., and whatnot. So let's have a conversation about it and move it forward. So if there's no more questions coming in, which obviously everything's back up and running by the looks of things, are there any other urgent business out there?
Councillor Scott, we've had one comment that they didn't actually see the slides of the bench. Could you pop that up?
I can pop that up, no problem. Bear with me.
Thank you.
I love that, of all of the things you want to see, that's the one. Can you see that, everybody? Isn't it lovely?
It looks like it's outside a menswear shop. We aren't we're not advertising the the owner?
No, I worked very hard to make sure there were no shop signs in it, but so you can't be doing advertising. But there you go. I hope you can all see that. And I'm happy to share the presentation anyway with anyone who wants it. And when Rob sends out his email, or we send out the email rather, to all those who have attended, I'm happy to put the presentation on as well, so you can all have a little look at that.
If we can just check with Leslie, who's the council officer running this, who sends out the notices. Can you, Leslie, confirm we could just attach an email with Kathy's PowerPoint presentation? You can send it out to everybody who you sent the invitations to.
Yes, of course. Yeah, if you just send that over to me, I'll send it out to everybody on the distribution list. And if anybody wants a copy of the presentation that isn't on the distribution list, if they could just pop their email in the chat. Won't publish it. It'll just be between you and I, and I'll add you to that list. Okay.
And I'll forward on the Justin Varney YouTube videos. How to eat well, how to exercise well, how to keep fit. Well worth a watch. Joe Wicks, this is the one you want to watch.
Okay, so on to the final item on the agenda, which is future meetings, which the next one hasn't been confirmed yet, but as we all know, we run them every 8 weeks or so, and we'll let you know again via Leslie when the next one is scheduled to start. And I think Rob has a question. He's waving his finger at me, look, like this.
He's waving. It's the only way I can attract the attention of my fellow councillor without shouting at her. It was just while on a meeting, I never missed the opportunity to talk about bins and rubbish. And just an update to make sure I've done it this time. Anybody who's on green waste, if you missed the chance to order your green bin, some people didn't get around to it until about March, and it was too late then. I think the council closed the applications. If you're on register and you had a bin last year and you forgot to order this year, you can now get your bin at a reduced discount price, I think, to run through for the rest of the financial year. So if you missed out, go on the website, reapply, and you get a half price bin for the rest of the year. The other thing, just to remind people, if you want to use one of the council waste disposal tips, the household recycling centre tips, one in Sutton, one in Castle Vale, the nearest ones for us, you can, but you have to book. Go on the website again. You can do it on the phone if you want to, but if you go on the website, best way to do it, you get offered a slot. You can go once a week, but not more than once a week with the same car. If you're a two-car household, you can go in each car once a week and make 2 trips, but you still need to go and book. I've done it myself, and it is quick to get in. You get a slot, 15-minute window, and you're pretty much in and out on the 15-minute window. That's the plus side. The minus side is you've still got to book a slot. And don't forget to take your ID with you.
Yes, you will need your ID, definitely.
You need to take a photo ID and something that proves you live in the address that you live in. Otherwise, you will get turned away. Right, that's my rubbish update. So I think we're done.
I think we're done. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining us today. I'm sorry that there was an issue that was a technical issue that prevented anyone asking questions at some point during the show. But feel free to email if you have any burning desire to get further questions answered. We'll see what we can do about that. Okay. So that leaves us to say
just
goodnight.
The last one. Sorry. Kath, the question, I think there is a viewer who can't see the slides. I think what would be useful, I won't name the resident, but if you can email to say what technology you're using. We're trying to, obviously we're learning, what works, what doesn't work. Clearly, this resident is using technology that doesn't suit the council system.
I did try to put,
so please just
I did try to put a copy of the picture in the chat, but that didn't work. So I was trying to help you out there, the lady that was asking for the copy of the picture, but I'm afraid we'll have to email it to you. Or better yet, go and visit the bench.
Drink. We'll see you in September.
Yes, we'll see you all in September. Thank you for attending. It's always a pleasure.
Bye all.